Good morning and welcome to my Wireshark tutorial. Today what I'd like to do is kind of show you around the Wireshark environment. From default it comes out of the box with a lot of features turned on, but what I've done is kind of customized it for what I use most frequently in the telecom industry. So out of the, as soon as you install it, you're looking, at this home screen. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on a sample capture here for a minute, just to kind of show you the environment. Get a page full of packets, and then we'll go from there. Okay, good. So you'll notice that, if you've installed Wireshark, you'll notice that my screen probably looks a lot different than yours, because I've added, the information that I feel is most useful when looking at Wireshark traces, to my columns here. So, for instance, and I've got it kind of laid out logically the way I would, look for the information. So I'll kind of explain that to you. So obviously the packet numbers are important. The time is important, and the time may need to be changed. Hold on. Okay, that wasn't going to work with an open door, so I had to go shut it. Anyway, the time may need to be changed depending on what you're looking for. So if you're trying to measure something like how many seconds something dropped, or how long does it take before a call drops, or something along those lines, then the default, of counting since the trace started is a good idea. However, if somebody sends you a trace and says, the problem happened between 7:30 and 7:50 a.m., then you may want to change the packet or the time here. The way you can do that is if you go into View and go to Time Display Format, then you have all of these different formats that you can use. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if the person or the computer that originally ran the trace is in a different time zone, then the trace is going to show the time for that for your time zone, not for their time zone. So if they're an hour ahead, then when you open the trace where they're saying it's 11:45, in your trace it's going to be 10:45. So keep that in mind, when you're looking at traces. I guess, while we're going over the file menu, I'll keep going through that. One of the things that I do quickly as soon as I get a trace is verify that a couple of things. One is that it has the devices in the trace that I'm looking for, or the traffic. So the way I can do that is I can go to statistics, and then I can go to, I believe it's endpoints. Yes. So endpoints, here by looking at this, this window, I can tell that I have traffic from a D-Link device, some multicast traffic, another D-Link device, okay, yeah, I know what that is. And then I was wondering, I was like, I don't have two D-Links on my network, but I actually do. And then my Samsung computer here. So if I was looking for D-Link traffic or multicast traffic or Samsung traffic, then I'm all set. The other way you can kind of break it down is by IP address. So I can go through the list of IPs, and if I know what IP addresses I'm troubleshooting, I can quickly look, and this window is going to show me every IP address that exists in this packet capture without me having to scroll through thousands of packets. So that becomes real helpful as well. The next piece is this will show me TCP traffic. So it still gives me the IP address, however, it gives me the TCP port. So if I was looking for traffic on port 80, I have none here. So I can tell if somebody was telling me that they can't access the internet, I'm going to be like, well, the Wireshark trace you sent me has no attempts to access the internet on port 80. I do see port 443. It could be secure internet connection. And then also UDP, you can look and see what UDP packets are covered here. So if I know devices operate on like 30,000 port range, then I can look and open this trace up and say, well, do I see any traffic in the 30,000 port range? No. Okay, well, the trace wasn't captured properly, or the activity didn't happen within this capture. So quickly, without spending a whole lot of time on a Wireshark, if somebody reports a problem to me, the first thing that I do is look at this endpoints window and says, okay, are all the devices present here, or all the packets or all the ports present here that I'm troubleshooting? If they're not here, then I'll send the trace back and say, sorry, I'm not seeing the traffic that you're referencing. Okay, so the other thing that I do is the time. Typically when I'm troubleshooting a problem, I'll ask and say, when did this problem happen? Can you tell me specifically within a 10-minute range or a 15-minute range of the time? So I can go to statistics, and then also go to, there should be summary here, summary. And this tells me now what kind of gives me a summary of the trace that I'm looking at. The key things that I look on are when was the first packet captured and when was the last packet captured, and how long was the trace running. So for me, I'm typically troubleshooting VoIP issues, and if they tell me that the problem happened at anything other than 7:43 a.m. between these seconds, and I'm like, I'm sorry, the trace that you sent me doesn't cover that period. We need to get a trace that covers that particular period. And, by doing that, I can quickly say, is this trace worth digging into in less than a minute? I mean, probably 30 seconds, because I look at those two windows and say, okay, the problem was reported at 7:43 a.m. It was reported on these ports, or we expect the traffic to be on these ports. It was reported between these two devices, IP addresses or MAC addresses, and that, so I can then go in and look and see exactly the traffic. One thing, since I said MAC addresses, I want to go back and show you this other window real quick. If I go to statistics and then go to endpoints again, one of the things you'll see is these addresses are by name. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes it's not. So it depends. If you're looking for a specific MAC address, then you may want to turn off the name resolution, and it'll show you the full MAC address. But as you probably know, every MAC address is unique to a manufacturer. So Wireshark has the ability to go and decode those manufacturers in most cases, and it'll tell you what the devices are. So I can see that in this case I have a Samsung computer and a D-Link router. So if I'm troubleshooting either one of those, then I can I can quickly identify. However, if I don't know what type of device it is, I just know the MAC address or even the IP address, then I can look for it this way. Okay, so that kind of shows me how, before I even start digging into a trace, go through those two steps if somebody sends you a trace to troubleshoot, and make sure that the event that you're looking for exists within the trace. And that keeps you from having to look through. I mean, some traces can get pretty big. This one's pretty short. It's only got 53 packets. But I get some traces that are gigs of data. Sometimes you'll tell your client and say, look, just set up a Wireshark trace and capture everything, and then I'll filter through it, just for simplicity, right? So let's go back. So the time was what I was speaking about. So make sure that you set your time to the most appropriate use of what you're looking for. So if you're looking for packets that happen at a specified time, then you may want to change it to time of day. Protocol. So as I'm reading through, protocols important. Most of this traffic that I deal with is either going to be SIP, TCP, UDP, or multicast. The rest of the traffic is fairly unimportant to me. These fields here are used a lot in VoIP for quality of service. So I like to display those to see if they have quality of service implemented. So this will give me the VLAN ID if they're using VLANs. This will give me, if they're using priority values for DSCP or 802.1p layer 2 class of service. So I can see, within the packets, none of these packets obviously are being prioritized or quality of service isn't implemented here. So I would be able to see that here if it was. So anyway, I can see what the source MAC address is. So this is my D-Link device. This is the IP address. Oh, there we go. That makes more sense. This is the IP address for my D-Link device. And then this is the port in which that D-Link device is coming from. And then the destination for all of this traffic, it appears to be some kind of broadcast traffic. And destination port. And these two fields I look at, every now and then, but mostly, especially in the industry that I'm in, the notes don't apply a whole lot. If I'm trying to figure out if packets are going in order, and most definitely if I'm troubleshooting SIP, then those info screens come in handy. But if I'm just looking to identify traffic and if it's flowing properly, then all of these fields are the most important to me. If you want to customize these columns across the top, then what you can do is go through the, just right click on the column or the column bar, and you can see these are all my displayed columns. But if I want to edit the columns, I can just go to preferences, and then here under columns, now I can configure exactly, if I want to drag the info all the way up here to the front, because that's the most important to me. Typically you should be able to drag and drop these columns in any order that you want. Let's see if this one works here. If I wanted this over here, yeah, okay. So that's one way, or you can also do it within the environment itself. So the way I, the way my thought process goes is I'm always looking, okay, what's the device? So that's why I have this one here. What's the IP address and what port am I coming from? And then what device am I going to? What's the IP address and what's the port that I'm going to? And then this tells me everything that I need to know about the packets in general. Are they tagged? Are they not tagged? What protocol am I using? So at a glance, as I'm reading from left to right, then I can kind of quickly follow the communication path. So let's go through a couple of the file menus here to see if there's any other important. Yeah, this one is very important. So now that I've pulled up a list of packets, let's go take a look here. Display filters are probably the next most important thing. There's two types of filters that I'm aware of in Wireshark. We have what's called capture filters, and we also have display filters. Capture filters are important if you know exactly what type of traffic that you're looking for and you don't suspect that any other traffic is going to play a role in causing the problem that you're looking for. So for instance, if I go into capture and go to interfaces, I can go to options, and there's this window here that I have a filter in that, basically it's filtering out all the broadcast traffic, all the ARP traffic, and I just want to see TCP or UDP traffic. Another filter, and I don't know all of the filters offhand, but one that I would look for online, there are a ton of resources. So if you know what kind of traffic you're looking for specifically, like if you're troubleshooting a DHCP issue, or you're troubleshooting a multicast issue, or you're troubleshooting DNS issue, there are filters that are specifically designed in Wireshark that will filter out all this extra traffic and show you just those packets. One that you may use frequently if you're in telecom is a SIP filter. Now this filter would work as a display filter, but it doesn't work as a capture filter. So I would have to look that up. SIP capture filter Wireshark. And let's see what appears to be the most relevant here. I always like the Wireshark wiki. So we'll go here. And this is telling me all about SIP, which I really don't need to know. Display filter, capture filter. You cannot directly filter SIP protocol while capturing. However, if you know the UDP or TCP port or port used, see above, you can filter it on that. Okay, so I can't filter just based on the protocol. However, what they're telling me that I can do is I should be able to go and do a capture filter and say if I wanted to just use 5060 instead of 80, and then we would call this SIP, that should work. So port 5060, and this is going to give me both TCP and UDP, port 5060, and if I hit start, what you'll see is I'm not getting any packets here at all. So it's not even taking the time to fill in my Wireshark file and use up storage on my computer with any information that's not coming through on TCP port 50 or TCP or UDP port 5060. So this is a capture filter. This means that it's only going to capture the traffic that I intend to look at. If you're troubleshooting something that uses port 5090, you put that port number in there, and the only thing, and you can leave it running, you know, for a day, a week, a month, and then when you come back to that trace, the only thing that's going to be in that file, the only thing that you're going to have the ability to view will be traffic on that port 5090. Okay, so display filters are a little different. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the capture filter. So I'm going to go back into my interfaces and go back to options, and there's not a clear option, so we'll just use the backspace. And we're capturing Wi-Fi, so we're going to go ahead and capture a few more packets to take a look at. Okay, it was giving me a warning that said, you know, you're saying you don't want to save anything, but there was nothing there to save to start with. So now, you know, I've got packets going again, and I'm just going to let it fill up a page here, and then I'll show you the difference between a capture filter and a display filter. So right now we're capturing, you know, pretty much everything that that goes through. Now we'll go ahead and stop there. That should be good enough for my example of a display filter. So I'm seeing all this traffic, but let's say maybe I'm only interested in web traffic that's going to and from the internet. So now imagine, you know, traffic. You know, this is pretty easy. I can filter down through here, destination port, 80. There's web traffic. However, you know, like I said, I get capture files that are gig in size, and if I'm trying to filter through all of that, looking for something, then these filters are huge in trying to decode, because you can chain the filters together. You can say, only show me web traffic from this particular IP address, because you have the and or option. So and means if I combine them together and use and, it says only show me web traffic on port 80 and IP address of this. So that'll show me, you know, specifically web traffic coming from that IP address. However, if I put in show me web traffic on port 80 or this traffic from this IP address, it's going to show me everything from that one IP address, and then it's only going to show me web traffic on port 80 for everybody else. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're using filters. So just an idea of a filter. There's a few that I use, you know, frequently, and sometimes I'm very forgetful, so I have to look them up all the time. But I know they exist. So anyway, so just for the sake of looking here, I see that packet's 80. If I wanted to look at all packets, or that port, all ports with the port 80, then I can filter down to port 80. See, there's two packets that I didn't even see, and those are going to be the replies to these two packets. And if you see here, you can see, you know, the first packet that went out left my computer, went to this IP address, and so the MAC address of the destination is going to be a D-Link device, and the destination IP address is 173.194.115.68. Anyway, so web traffic going on at the end of the day. So let's say now, so it's showing me here, I can actually filter this down by destination port and source port if I wanted to. I'll let you figure that one out on your own. One of the other important pieces about display filters is, let's say I want to see everything but traffic on TCP port 80. So I can put an exclamation point at the beginning of that, and now press enter, and now you'll see you won't see any traffic coming from TCP port 80. Okay. So that's an idea of how to use the display filters. Now the thing that is important to know is, like I said, is I can even run a display filter while I'm doing a trace. So if I do, let's say, go ahead and start this. Continue without saving. So right now, as we look at the screen, we see web traffic, but so right now everything on my computer is, I'm sorry, I'm looking at everything but web traffic. So wow, that's pretty good. So right now you'll see down here at the bottom, that my displayed packets are 3, but my captured packets are 54. So out of all 54, 57 of these packets, only 3 of these are dealing with what I want. So now I'm running a live capture, and I'm only looking at exactly the traffic that I want to look at. So let's do like maybe ICMP, which is pings. So if I go to a command prompt and I set up a ping loop to, let's see if 8.8.8.8 will reply. So see, now the only traffic that I'm seeing are the packets, or my ping requests going in and out, in and out. So as soon as I stop these, then the traffic stops over here, but I'm still capturing. So if I want to go back and look at anything else, all I have to do is remove the filter, and all these other packets are still here, right? Okay, so I think you get the idea behind the display filters. It's a very powerful tool. When you start getting into some of the protocols specifically, you'll go through and you can just go through. Let's grab like a 443 packet. Each protocol has different. Actually, let's see what ICMP shows. That might be an easy one to break down. So we're going to look at ICMP packets. So here I can open this ICMP packet up, and I can look at the data that's contained within. I can see, what's in the header, what's in, contained within the packet itself. If it's encrypted, it doesn't really help me much. So this shows me my source address, my destination address, and so forth. Differentiated services field. So this comes in handy when you're doing quality of service. So there's a whole nother session that I could do on breaking packets apart and looking at different data within the packets. So I just want you to know today that exists. One of the things that I showed in another video that I did a couple days ago that you'll find on my YouTube channel is I was showing that I could send email from the command line, which comes useful in troubleshooting foreign networks. But one of the things that I was showing people is when you send email on port 25 SMTP and it's not encrypted, hey, take a look, I can read your entire email over here within the packet capture. So anybody that's wired into the network also will have the same capability. So always try to use encryption when available. Even with Facebook and stuff like that, use that HTTPS protocol. Okay, anyway, I won't go into that either. So let's go into a little bit more about the packet capture. So what I was about to show you, so we're doing display filters and we were doing capture filters. And then now that I've filtered out all the traffic that I want to show this traffic to somebody else. So they're going to say, hey, send me that Wireshark capture and show me that. So instead of sending them all 1,500 packets, and I only want to show them 36, one of the things that's really important is I can go over here. Oops, I got to stop my capture first. I can go over here and say export specified packets. So now it's asking me, what do I want to save in this capture file? Do I want to save all packets or the selected packets? And so what it's showing me here is my selected packets are, I've got one packet selected. That's right, because this packet is selected, so this isn't the filter. So it said if I want to send just this one packet to somebody, I can do that. If I want to send all packets, I can send all displayed or all captured packets. Big difference between those two. And it'll also be a big difference between the file size. So if you're thinking about emailing this to somebody, you want to try to filter down the traffic as much as you can yourself. However, if you don't know what you're looking for in the trace, then it's always, to me, it's always more important to see more information than less. So, SIP providers or VoIP installers will send me traces, and they filtered it down to just the SIP signaling. And we're troubleshooting an audio issue. And I said, this is great. I said, I can see that the audio is set up on this port. However, what I don't see is the actual audio itself. So then I'll have to go back and ask them to send me the trace again without the filters, without filtering down the traffic. So it depends on what the person you're sending it to is looking for. So if they're only looking for SIP signaling, then do a filter on SIP, save your displayed packets as only your SIP displayed packets, and then when you send that over to them to analyze, then they will only they'll appreciate that you've filtered out everything else, I'm sure. Okay, so let's keep going through here. So that was the big piece here. One of the things that's important is sometimes I'll get people that'll send me a whole string of Wireshark traces. So basically, I guess, let me go back, and it kind of leads me into another piece here about the environment, is if I'm going to leave a trace running extended, for an extended amount of time, down here at the bottom, I can have these captures written to a file. And because we know, large files are hard to transport across the internet, I can say, write a new file every 10 megs. Okay, that's great. So now I can break up these files into, into different sizes. And it also, when it saves the file name, it saves it by time and date. So I can look, and if somebody tells me it happened between this hour and within that hour, I see 5 traces, by time and date. I can pull that 50 megs worth of files and merge those together on my computer once I get them, and then I can look at it all as one trace instead of having to open 5 different files. I'll tell you another trick that I use to kind of gauge a customer's network traffic is, when I install Wireshark, I'll set this up, and then I can go look, and so I'm capturing, it's going to write a new file every 10 megs, and it's going to time and date stamp. So it kind of gives me a gauge of what the amount of traffic is that's flowing through the network. Is if I look at the timestamps between the file sizes. So I know each of one of those files represents 10 megs of data, and if those timestamps get really close together at some parts of the day, then I know that it's taken a lot less time to fill up that file. So that means there's a whole lot more traffic on the internet or on the network. And now if I see that those packets are only happening once an hour, then I know that the traffic on the network is slowed down. So where this comes in handy is if you have intermittent problems and they're telling you, that they can't determine when it happens, and you see that it's only happening in those packets and those captures that are real close together, then what you may draw from that is that the packets, that it may be only happening during peak traffic times. So maybe quality of service might be something you want to look at implementing. Okay. So anyway, so under the file menu, there's the merge option, which led me to telling you that, hey, by the way, when you're capturing, if you leave it running instead of having it log all to one file, or logging all in your memory, which will eventually fill your memory up and lock your computer up, you can have it write to a new file every 10 megs, or you can do it every so many minutes. And then even if you wanted to say, stop the capture after you catch a gig worth of data, then you can do that. Or this ring buffer, what that allows you to do is say, I'm going to expect in a day that I should get 1 file per hour, and after you write 24 files, then start overwriting the previous files. So you can limit, you can keep Wireshark from filling up your computer with traces, because these traces, depending on where you're capturing from, will generate a lot of data, especially if you're not using capture filters, because it's going to put every single packet that runs across that network in your computer, depending on where you tap into the network. So this ring buffer will allow you to set the files to overwrite themselves every 24 files. So the way I'm configured right now is it's going to create 24 10 megabyte files, and the 25th file will overwrite the first file, and it'll continue. So now, when the problem happens, I've got a certain amount of files, and I have to go back and find that file fairly quickly, depending on how fast the files are filling up. Okay. So that's about that. So we're still in the file menu. So merge, that's useful when you're, like I said, when you're trying to merge 5 Wiresharks together. And another thing that I'll do is I'll merge, if you run Wireshark traces at 2 points on the network at the same time, then you can merge those files together and look at them, all in one continuous flow to say, okay, did the packets left here, showed up here, the packets left there but never showed up here. So a lot of times I'll merge, 2 traces together, and what that helps you do is to align the timestamps, and so I can filter by timestamp or display the packets by timestamp for 2 different files at the same time, and then I can follow the traffic between both files back and forth. So merge option comes in handy. Edit, I don't do a whole lot of in here. I think I may start trying to use this packet comment. So as I'm decoding Wireshark traces, I can leave my comments in the trace and then send it back. Just have to make sure that the person I'm sending it to knows that they're there. Zoom in, zoom out. I don't really use all of this. What I do a lot is, by default, I think all of these come enabled for the environment. So transport layer. And if I go to view, network layer. So what that does is it will go through, and now it's trying to add names to everything that I do. Let's clear this filter out and look at everything. And I don't do this a lot because the protocols that I work with mostly are proprietary, and I don't do this because what it tries to do is, if it associates a port that I'm using with a typical, for instance, let's say 3389 is typically remote desktop. However, it doesn't have to always be remote desktop. So if I'm using it for something else, then it's going to tag on this trace. It'll say, oh, that's not port 3389. That is Wireshark, that's remote desktop. So let's see, name resolution. Anyway, so I don't like doing that because it makes it confusing. I do like doing it for the MAC layer only, but not for like the protocols, and I don't like it to try to decode the traffic for me. I just typically like to see the raw traffic, like here. Instead of telling me that's 8.8.8.8, it's telling me that it's a Google public DNS server. If I'm if I don't know that that 8.8.8.8 is a Google server, I may ignore that packet without even looking at it. I can always go over here and look within the packet and see what the source address is and what the destination address is and so forth. 8.8.8.8. But most of the time I'd rather see it out here. So I'm going to go into view and turn off for transport layer. View, turn it off for the network layer. View, and honestly I don't really know, haven't figured out what this piece is yet, but the MAC layer I leave on because MAC addresses, I can at least see the last last few characters of the MAC address, which will help me uniquely identify a device. But I like to see what kind of devices I'm communicating with on the network. Alright, so that's pretty much all I use in the view window. The time display format we already went over. Okay. So Go, I hardly ever use this. I use my mouse more often than I use this. Capture. So capture interfaces, this is kind of an important window because one of the things that you'll see here is that I have multiple devices that I can trace on. This is particularly important if you're using a VPN tunnel. One of the things, you'll have two options. You'll be able to trace your Ethernet port, or you'll be able to trace the actual VPN connection itself. So if you trace the Ethernet port, the only thing that you're going to see is traffic to and from your VPN server. If you trace the VPN tunnel, then you'll see the traffic within the tunnel coming from your computer or whatever. So just going to keep that in mind. Also, a lot of laptops have both wired and wireless connections. My computer here does as well. So I have my physical hard port, which is my local area connection. I can verify it. And then I also have my Wi-Fi connection. And so you can also see that I only have packet information coming from my Wi-Fi connection. So that's pretty much all I use within this menu. Analyze, display filters, decode as. This is one that I use quite frequently because by default, Wireshark will show you the protocols that it thinks are being used. However, it may not show you what you're trying to decode as. So if you know that a particular port is a particular type of traffic, then I can say, hey, I know you're trying to decode this as TCP, but it's not really TCP, you just think it is. You can go into Analyze, go to Decode as, and then it'll say, okay, I see both of these ports, what do you want me to decode those as? Maybe they're RTP. Where I use this most frequently is when I'm troubleshooting audio files. And then I have to go in and say, no, this is not UDP traffic, this is RTP traffic, and I want to decode as RTP traffic. Obviously it knows this is an RTP traffic because it's not giving me that option. So quite frequently, and I'll do some other traces on troubleshooting, or some other Wireshark videos on troubleshooting specific protocols. That's just too much to cover in today's video. So with that being said, like I said, this decode as will come in handy because most frequently, especially if you're running proprietary protocols, you'll have to go in and tell Wireshark how to evaluate that particular piece of traffic. Because I think at first, UDP traffic, it'll come up and it won't have like the codec listed or anything like that you're using until you tell it's an RTP packet, and then it says, oh, okay, well, I'll look at that differently, apply a different set of rules to the packet, and voila, you're looking at all the information that's pertinent to troubleshooting an audio packet as opposed to a UDP packet. Okay. Statistics, I've already gone over summary and endpoints. There's a lot of different tools here that you could use. IP addresses, I'm not actually, that's a filter. So if I wanted to filter everything for an IP address, graphs. You can look for everything with packet sizes, if you're looking for a certain size of packet. Endpoints, I said I use that frequently. Endpoints, conversations, so yeah, that's pretty much, summary and endpoints are about the most two frequent packets that I use, or two options that I use out of this menu here. Like I said, and that's just to quickly understand the file and what I'm looking at and make sure all the traffic that I want to see is contained within that file. Telephony, on the other hand, is something that I use very frequently. RTP, and I'll go into, I can't cover it in this video, but RTP, it'll give me the ability to show me every RTP conversation, so every audio call within the packet trace. Once I go in and say, hey, decode this as RTP, because I know it is, then I can say show all streams, and then from within that window, I can go in and then look at each particular stream, and it'll give me stats on that stream. And it also gives me the ability to play that audio stream back if the file is not encrypted. Okay, or the audio wasn't encrypted when it was captured. The other one is VoIP calls. So this comes in real handy when you're troubleshooting SIP traces, because it'll bring up let me see if I click it. It's not going to show me any data, but I'll show you. So it'll bring up every, who initiated the call, the phone number that it's from, the phone number that it's sent to, what protocol, how many packets. And then if you'll notice here, it's got player. So I can click on a particular call and hit player, and then it'll go through and show, I can play that call back again, as long as it's not encrypted. I can also, if I highlight a call, I can hit prepare filter, and it'll actually go in and fill this filter window in with all the information that I need to pull out the packets only for that particular call. So where that comes in handy is if you want to send that one call to somebody, then you can prepare the filter, and then you can go to file, export as, and save only the displayed packets, and now you've sent just that one call to whoever you need to analyze that file. Okay, that's a lot of good stuff for another day. The other information that you can see here is if under VoIP calls is flow. If it's a SIP call, then and SIP or H323 are two of the protocols that I know work in this window. If I hit flow, it'll actually show me the SIP stack in a visual graph, so I can see, communication went this way, it's got a little arrow, and back this way. So I can look at the SIP signaling as a graphic, as opposed to trying to look at the packets and make sure all the packets are there. So it'll show me all the messaging, the 200, the ringing, trying, connected, shows me the audio stream getting set up, all within that flow window. So check that out if you get time, and like I said, as soon as I can, I'll put another video out about specific protocols. Okay, so that's under telephony. Good stuff there, especially if you're in telecom. I've never used either one of these or these help. The wiki I use all the time because, like I said, if I'm looking for, sometimes I'll get, questions on protocols that I'm not familiar with. So I'll start going to try to figure out how to break down that protocol. And like I said, the thing with all protocols is, well, maybe not proprietary ones, but any industry available protocol like SIP or DNS or DHCP, there's standards on the internet that you can go look up and say, this is the way it's intended to work. And then if you go back and pull that standard up, then you can go back to the Wireshark and look at the standard, and then look at your trace and say, this is the way it's intended to work. It's not working that way here. Something's wrong. And then you have to go back and start, going to the individual. Even with SIP, SIP is, if I put a call on hold, or if I send this message, this is what's supposed to come back to me. And if you look at, and that message isn't coming back, you can say, look, according to SIP standard, XYZ, this says if I send you this message, you're supposed to send this back, and I don't see that coming back. So that's probably real deep SIP troubleshooting that you don't want to get into, but wiki comes in handy when you're looking for filters and tools on how to troubleshoot protocols or filter down traffic. Mostly is what I use it for. So if I'm looking for everything with a DSCP value of 46, I don't necessarily, I know that I can see it here, but I don't know what the filter is, so I can go into the wiki and look it up, and then it'll show me only traffic with a DSCP value of 46. So you can turn scroll on or off here. That's about all I use. And I use the colorized packets. I think it has a way that if you're constantly troubleshooting the same traffic over and over and over, you can build a set of rules that will colorize packets that match the destination port and the source port, or the destination port and the protocol that you're looking for, and you can say, hey, show me all my TCP port 6000s in light blue with white lettering. So I think you can go in and actually build a rule, but I've never taken the time to do that. Clear and apply the filters. This expression window will help you build filters. Learn these, because like I said, is present, specifically equals, doesn't equal, less than, greater than. I don't ever use these. So keep these in mind. If you don't know what filter, you might be able to filter out in here, but there's thousands of filters in here, so it may help, it may not. But like I said, this little wiki and putting it in Google search what you're looking for, somebody's probably asked the question before. Okay, well, I've rambled on for almost an hour about Wireshark, but like I said, get familiar with this tool. What I tell people all the time, and I kind of believe it, is that to me Wireshark is the new butt set in telecom or test set. So you wouldn't go to a job site, and as an installing technician without having your test set, because that's one of your major tools that you use. And so I tell technicians today is don't go to a job site without having the ability to do a Wireshark capture, because that's your most useful tool with digital trunks, such as SIP trunks, troubleshooting voice over IP, troubleshooting audio streams, troubleshooting network issues. So as like I said, this Wireshark is my most powerful tool. I would not show up at a job site without having this tool under my belt. And like I said, I used to use the butt set all the time. I could tell you what to listen for, what it should sound like, how to do different variations of tests, and that used to be my most powerful tool. But that's starting to phase away, and now Wireshark is my most powerful tool. So just keep that in mind. And like I said, get familiar with Wireshark, set up and get familiar with your environment on your laptop. Set up your environment so that it works for you, because like I said, out of the box, it'll show you some information, but man, being able to see all of this information about the voice traffic that I'm looking at on a day-to-day basis is huge, because I can follow the whole conversation. And if I have that coupled with a network topology, then I can quickly break down where the failure in communication is. So alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed the class. As always, please, I welcome feedback on my videos. Subscribe so you can see the future videos. Like it so that I know that you are enjoying the information that I'm putting out there. And leave me comments and let me know if there's anything in particular that you would like to see. If I have the time, I will definitely try to put a video together on that if I know what you're talking about. Anyway, have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.